Hi everyone, welcome to the next edition of the DFS Down Under show for week 9 of the AFL. Smatho and Hef and the Big Hef are back for another action jam-packed show previewing the first two games here, round 9. As always, we're provided by... I've stuffed it. We're presented by dailyfantasyrankings.com.au for all of your AFL DFS needs, cheat sheets, data tools. It's all there, even Jesse's previews throughout the weekend. Bring in Hef. How are you going, mate? What's happening in your world?
Again.
No.
Start again then, but let's run with that.
We are human. Let's just get cracking with this kind of show. How are you, mate?
I'm very well, Smatho. I'm looking forward to footy every night. DFS every night. Buckle up because I don't know if we'll be saying this in about 3 weeks' time, but we've got plenty coming up.
There is plenty coming up, and speaking of plenty, I've got some notes here about Super Friday. Have you seen what Super Friday is going to dish up here?
Super Friday, no.
AFL.
I want to know.
AFL, obviously on Friday, doubleheader.
Yep.
NRL, doubleheader.
Yeah, who cares?
The NBA season starts 8:30 Australian Eastern Standard Time. 2 game slate there. The MLB's in full swing at the moment. Then
Yep.
the PGA's on every night, and then you got horse racing during the day. So I've counted 6 fantasy contests on Draftstars you can play on Friday, which is a hell of a change what we were doing a couple of months ago, not doing anything at all, Hef.
Yeah, it's just coming at us from all angles. Beautiful. You can pick and choose. Don't have to play it all.
You just roll out of bed, put an NBA team, and then if you got half an hour to do your MLB, and then you got all day to do your AFL and NRL, and then horse racing during the day, just whack a team in there. So it's going to be
starting to heat up the horse racing too. I'm looking forward to seeing what we get in the springtime from Draftstars.
Ooh,
something different.
Something different. So stay tuned to Draftstars at all time. So yeah, as you mentioned, Hef, 32 games in 20 days. How are you going to actually prepare yourself and attack AFL during this crazy compressed period?
Yeah, I don't know, but I have trouble getting my head around multi-game slate, so I'm looking forward to having a lot of single-game action, which we tend to have a lot of anyway now that they like to play Thursday nights and Friday nights, and even on the weekends, Draftstars have the pretty good single slate offerings too. But if you do have to take a night off, that's the best thing about DFS. You don't have to be stuck playing every single game like on season long. You can freshen up if you need to, and if you're on a roll, you can keep going. It's going to be magnificent.
Make sure you stick to dailyfantasyrankings.com.au for every slate preview in the next 20 days. We're going to bring on a new writer here, Hef. Tom, who's been doing our NRL work, he's going to give Jesse a bit of a chop out and provide us with his previews during this compressed period. So welcome, Tom, to you, and make sure you give him a shout out on our socials, including at RankingsDFS and on our Facebook page. Mate, let's get stuck into the show. Big thumbs up this week. Careful where
you go with this thumbs up.
Well, there were plenty of nominations throughout the weekend. I had 5 days of footy to go through all through the slate winners, and man, there were some big winners, including, especially on Draftstars, Whelan absolutely smashed it last night in the Freo Geelong game. Fate Bender, he got one as well. King 82 is a bit of a rising star. He's actually doing really well on Draftstars. So a little shout out to you, mate. Then Habs, who saw off a couple on Sunday, and 25-14-10 on Draftstars get our nominations for the thumbs up. But unfortunately, you do not get that. Over at DraftKings, a couple of single winners this week, which was great. Bistiano and Dr. Cron 420 single bullet wins on DraftKings. The GOAT himself.
Single bullets always win the thumbs, don't they?
Oh, they do, but not this week. Not this week.
Oh no!
Even my boy JK, the GOAT, he actually cleaned up last night as well. But no, even Fate Bender even won a DraftKings slate, but they've already got thumbs up. In previous shows, if you go through a extensive library of DFR Down Under shows, they get their thumbs up. But this week's thumbs up goes to a player. His name is Briz17. He entered the Saturday DraftKings slate, which was a $10,000 on top, and proceeded to smash the slate by not even playing players in the last game. So let me bring up his side, and you can talk about Bris 17's effort here for DraftKings. Hef, take it away. What's happened here?
Well, when I think of thumbs up winners, I think of coolness under pressure. I think of calmness. I think of taking everything in their stride. I'll give you the tip. I was with Bris 17 watching the last game on Action on Saturday, and he was none of those things. If he was in the mounting yard, they would have been forced to scratch him, I reckon. He was in a muck lather of sweat. It was just getting too much for him. He wouldn't pay attention to anything going on. Just had one eye firmly on this game of footy, St Kilda Port, which wasn't the most inspiring game of footy I've ever seen. But he held on. He was about 50 points up with very little to go, and he still wouldn't go the early crow. But congratulations to you, Bristol. This team, this is a beautiful-looking team too. He was very strong on Kennedy, I know, on both sites. Kennedy and Parker. Look at Jed Anderson was very popular as well at his price tag. And he's even able to carry Toddy Goldstein, who was probably a bit of a letdown given his high price tag, but it was no worries for Big Briz, and he took home first and third on that slate.
Sensational effort there, the Bristol man. Obviously, he is well known to us too here at the DFS Down Under show. I hope one day he does sign up to be a DFR member, which is free to join at any time. So, mate,
he said he might watch the show hoping for a nomination this week. But
does he have a computer? That's the question.
I'll set it up for him, I think.
Mate, 2 thumbs up for you. Well done for you. That's $10,000 win. Yes, a little bit of bias there this week. Controversial as always on this particular show, but if you want to get the thumbs up from me, you make sure you win the big slates here in Australia. All right, Hef, let's move on with the show, and we've got a couple of games to break down. The first game we're going to talk about is Wednesday night footy, which is a bit hard to say, but we're going to have the Western Bulldogs, who are currently $2.03, playing the Richmond Tigers $1.80. It's a 7:10 AEST start. Spreads 2.5. Totals 119.5. As for the fantasy contest, Draftstars have a $75,000 single contest paired with a $5,000 mini and a $5,000 fiver. DraftKings have also released a $15,000 US dollar contest as well. In team news, a couple of force changes here for the Tigers with Nick Vlauston injured. So that's a pretty key out there for the Tigers. Rioli, Graham and Nash have been omitted. Ross, Markov, Cindy Stack and Trent Conchin are back for the Tigers. Sam Lloyd and Toby McLean are back for the Dogs for Callum Porter, who popped his shoulder, which kind of ruined a few DFS sides last week. And Lockie Young is also out for the Tigers. There's no issues with the weather at this stage. Maybe some dew because we're playing at Metricon Stadium. So, Hef, Wednesday night footy, trying to get that brain going again after having not much rest. See what you can do for this single slate. What can we do here?
No, my brain gets plenty of rest. Don't worry about that. Interesting clash, this one. Richmond slight favourites here. Although they're still pretty undermanned, Richmond. They seem ripe for the taking here from the Bulldogs. My query on the Bulldogs is if they've got a potent enough forward line to take advantage here of Richmond, because Richmond don't care if you win the ball. We've said this many times, but once you've got it, you better make it count, because they can get you on the rebound. And that's once they get out in space, Richmond, they can be hard to stop. So really exciting game, I think, this one will be.
I reckon it'll be an exciting game, but in terms of fantasy output, it might be a bit of a grind, this particular one, outside a couple of players. So let's break down this particular slate, and we'll start here with the Rucks, as always. And, geez, we pumped up Timmy English's tyres last week, and down came the rain and washed poor English out. Couldn't handle the soap, couldn't take a mark, therefore he couldn't get a kick, couldn't make a tackle. Only a lazy 40-odd points, but it's dry again, and he's going to take on the ruck combination of Soldo and probably Marble Choi. I don't see Nan Curvis coming back anytime soon. So, man, they leak the Tigers, so we might have to just pay up for the 14.5 for English, or can we just pay down the Soldo or Choi?
You pressured me into English last week, actually. I'm going to blame that on you. this week, yeah, I think that you've hit the nail on the head there with the conditions. Soldo's a bit of that Wits sort of mould of a ruckman, but with the dry conditions, English is going to give him a bit of a run around the ground. The Richmond ruck figures are always a little bit misleading because Nankervis tends to be really leaky. Soldo's probably not quite as bad, but still doesn't hold great fears. I think it's safe to say that English is probably the better play in a vacuum. The issue on this slate is if you can find some cheaper guys that you want to play, which makes you happy to pay up for English at that 14K price tag. If you can, then I think he's worth going with.
All right. I think I'll take English to start with, and if I don't like my side, I might have to take him out. But he'll be popular on Wednesday night. All right, let's go on to the defence. Now, the DFR tools on the website show that, the Tigers do give up a lot of points, but the Richmond options are really, really cheap. Like, really cheap. It's easy to get your Sydney stacks and wherever back there, but getting up to Johannesson and Caleb Daniel is going to take a fair amount of your salary. So what do you lean? Should we go a bit of balance or should we make a stand here?
Look, I think the first thing to note is the talk around Sydney Stack, let's be honest, Sydney Stack has been terrible this year after a really promising first year last year. Just hasn't looked the same player, but the talk around him from Hardwick this week has been that he's going to be played through the midfield. For the first time, I think we've seen him since he sort of made the AFL through the midfield. He has been named in the centre. We know it's not worth a piece of paper they're written on the team lineups these days, but all the talk around it, I think you'll see him in the midfield at 8,000. He's going to get every chance to return value there. Be interesting to see how different players handle him, especially the projection guys, because his numbers have been awful. How much of a bump you want to give him with this rumour of midfield talk is going to be really key on whether you play much Sydney Stack or not. The obvious back for Richmond is Jaden Short, who has just been really consistent there with Basher Hooley missing from the side. It's been a common theme over the past couple of years. He's starting to get quite expensive now at 12,500, but I still think there's a little bit of upside there for Short. So he's one of the safer options. In terms of the Bulldogs, I think you nailed the main guys there in Daniel and Johannesson, and I always find myself playing some Bailey Williams, who's around that 10,000 price bracket, and he's also capable of getting you a 70 at a good time, which is more than reasonable there. But in terms of cheap guys, there's a lot of guys with low ceilings here for both teams, really, which makes it difficult. One guy to stay clear of, I'd have to say, is Matty Suckling. He's named as a back, but he's got this half-forward role, which I wouldn't say it's very conducive to fantasy scoring against Richmond, that's for sure.
He's not really a pressure forward as such, wouldn't he? So
no, he's almost a marking target, which, well, not sure how that's going to play out. But, yeah, coming off of 15, his ownership's going to be on the floor, you'd have to think. But,
all right, let's move on to the midfield then. Bit of a trick. That was tricky to defence, so good luck with that one. All right, so midfield. So, question to you, Hef. How many mids last week scored over 65 fantasy points for Richmond?
Is Dusty a mid?
Oh, well, let's call him a mid, yes.
Okay, Dusty.
That's it. Everyone else scored under 65 points as a midfielder eligible in this particular game. So
that's not unusual for Richmond at this stage of the year either, is it?
It's not unusual, but they just don't have the firepower at the moment. Look, they get Cochin back, who is 10,890, which seems a little bit overs, just to be honest. But then you want to look at the Bulldogs, who they have really good ceiling players in McRae and Bontempelli and Smith and Lipinski and stuff like that. But considering there's not much value anywhere, they're going to be hard to get to. Wouldn't you think?
There is. Like Bontempelli's mid-13s, he's pretty easy to get to there. And I think it's only really McRae who you're going to struggle to get right up to there at nearly 16,000. You're going to want to try and do it, though, because if we look back to last week, GWS, they had 119 from Kelly, Cornelio, topped the 100. All the main guys for GWS, they just feasted. And we've talked about this time and time again with Richmond. They're quite happy to, well, either they're quite happy to or they just happen to. They give up so many points to these main big-name midfielders from the opposition. They don't tag. I don't see that changing. So it's going to be pretty popular to stuff these real name Bulldogs into your lineup. And, it seems like the obvious play to me.
Options under 10K, and there's a lot of Richmond options here. Shai Bolton. Do you want to comment on Shai Bolton with a couple of the Tigers coming back in, especially Cochin? Is he relevant anymore, or is he going to be back out half forward?
He's named Ruck Roller. He gives them something different there, Bolton, too. He's got pace. He's got generally good skills. You say Cochin comes back. Yes, he's going to spend a lot of time in the middle there, but they did drop Graham. Who else did they drop? They dropped someone else too. Nash was sort of floating around on the outside, but so they are bringing in a bit more midfield strength in Cochin. Jack Ross is pretty in and under type of player, and then if they're going to give Sydney Stack some run through the midfield as well, they do have a few more options. But Bolton was really good in the first half, and this has been a common theme with Bolton. If you could trade out at half time, you'd be doing it every week because his second halves have been putrid, but it's still under 10K. A guy who can bounce back is Kane Lambert. I might go early on him here rather than wait for the forwards because he actually was tagged at times by DeBoer. I don't know how hard it was, but that was a really interesting option for the tag. So when you look at his 60 from last week, I think there's definite reasons why that was the case, and you don't have to go back very far to find a couple of hundreds. So, he's definitely in play for me, Lambert.
All right, so let's move on to the forwards then. And as you can see, Hef, there's plenty of mid-forward options here, and there's plenty of cheap options, including the highest Bulldogs player actually here is Vandermeer at 9K. Don't mind a bit of Vandermeer. What do you think about him?
I really like Vandermeer as a player. He's more an impact than possession gatherer style of footballer at the moment, Vandermeer, but you don't have to go back too far to find a couple of 70s, which would be more than reasonable at that $9,000 price tag. Like you say, there's cheaper options here. I'm really inclined to be spending down in my forwards. That said, though, Dustin Martin is really standing out to me there at the $12,000 mark. We've talked about Bontempelli previously, how much we like to play him when he's going to avoid the tag. It looks to me like Dusty Martin's going to avoid a tag here, so he's always very easy to play under these circumstances.
Any cheap options down here?
Cheap options. I'm looking at Richmond forwards. The Bulldogs do tend to give up a fair amount of points to forwards. You got some really out of form players in Lynch and Rewalt who are only going to cost you in the $8,000 range. Both of those guys have got a ceiling when it clicks for them. So they are guys with potential to score high enough to win you a tournament. I do like the option of playing Bolton through the forward line as well. He's sub 10K. And then if you really want to save some cash, Cody Waitman's got some razzle dazzle about him, and at 5,000, it's hard to go wrong.
Well, he was in actually the winning lineup on DraftKings last week, Waitman. So
with a 23, so there you go. You're almost sacrificing that guy to get all the midfield stars in, and if he does bob up for a 40 or 50, you're laughing.
So make sure you get the daily fantasy rankings for Wednesday night football previews, the cheat sheet for both DraftKings and Draftstars, and good luck in that particular match. Let's move on to Thursday night footy now. And this time we've got the Melbourne Demons, who are at $2.25, taking on the Port Adelaide Power at $1.65. Spreads around a goal at 6.5 with a total of 124.5. We are up the Gabba for this particular match. And this stage, the weather's looking pretty good as well, as the night games in Queensland could produce a bit of dew in the winter. For the fantasy contest, Draftstars are going at massive again with a $75,000 contest with all the fivers, the minis, and micros are all there on Draftstars. At the time of recording, we don't have DraftKings offerings at this stage, nor we don't have any salaries, so we won't be able to talk about them in the show. In team news, we don't have Todd Marshall. He actually busted his thumb and will be out for 6 weeks. On the Port's website, I was doing a bit of research today. They've got plenty of names they've been thrown up for his replacement, including Wally Buzzard from the dead. There's a couple of rookies in Woodcock and Cox. Some great names there. There are possibilities.
What was that?
Woodcock and Cox.
Wow, I've never heard of either of them, but let's hope they get a game.
They might get a game. Lycett's not too far away. I don't think they'll bring him back against Max Gawn in this particular match.
Ooh, how come?
I'm just not sure. I don't think he's fit with his knee. All right. So let's just assume that he's not in, but we can talk about it in the ruck section at the moment. As always, looking at the DFR tools on the Daily Fantasy rankings website. The Demons give up a lot of uncontested footy. All right. They're pretty much one of the top in the league for giving up the ball. So therefore, Port defenders and midfielders could get a boost in this particular game. So, Hef, what do you think about this particular match on Thursday night?
Oh, I really don't enjoy games with Port Adelaide because they're really stingy in terms of giving up fantasy points to the opposition, and they just don't make for too much fun because I don't like playing Port Adelaide players because they're pretty boring to play themselves. But against Melbourne are traditionally one of the easier teams to score against. So the obvious way to go here is your Port stacks when you look at the data. But you only have to look last week that St Kilda were too good for Port Adelaide, and that would have thrown that thinking under the bus.
All right, let's break down this particular match by starting with the rucks. And geez, I actually remember this game back in round 1, 2019. The Port actually went after Max Gawn, a bit of rough and tumble, and been very aggressive, and only kept him to a measly 60-point score, I do believe. But Scotty Lycett, who played in that game, actually had a 44 fantasy point game. But that was a long time ago. But we have three options at this stage: Max Gawn at 18,500, Lycett's at 12.6 if he gets a game, or Peter Laddams at 10.1. What do you think about this one? Because I'm not real sure at this stage.
No, this is really tricky. I reckon Lycett I reckon he loves these games where he can just get real aggressive with a big name. As a West Coast fan, I used to love Lycett. He did some wonderful jobs on Grundy in that premiership year. Get the feeling that we obviously saw him do the same to go. It's almost like a ruck tag that he plays and just gets right in their face and takes them out of the game. So if Lycett plays, it makes it really difficult because I don't want to pay $18,000 for Gawn under those circumstances. But then Lycett sort of sacrifices himself, so I don't really want to pay $12 for him. And then you've got Laddams just sort of frittering away up forward more at $10K, which makes him hard to play as well. But we're going to talk, if Lycett's not there, Laddams is likely to get massacred, but he does find the ball really well himself. He's got 21 and 20 disposals in his 2 games this year, which is amazing really for a ruckman to churn out those disposal figures, let alone in your first sort of 10 games of footy. The problem from a fantasy perspective is he gets a lot of handballs. But I'd almost be tempted just to go with Laddams and save that 8K, just knowing that even if Gawn massacres him in the hit-outs, that Laddams is able to win his ball around the ground. And Melbourne do give up a lot of uncontested possessions. So I'm going to lean Laddams if they're one-on-one. I'm almost going Laddams if they play Lycett as well, just because he's the cheapest option of the lot. Maybe you could look at Luke Jackson in that circumstance if the double-headed Port Monster comes after Gawn. Then you can just pay 6,000 for Jackson and look across the rest of the game to spend up your money.
Yeah, I don't mind that. Look, I had Jackson last week. The conditions didn't really suit him. Slippery marking. It didn't mind. Gawn had literally the ball on a string last week, so a lot of tackles, a lot of marks for him. But yeah, it's going to be a tough one, especially paying up for that 18K for Gawn. All right, let's look at the defence. And look, if the data holds up here, uncontested footy at down back, then we need to pair Port players. But the two that we really want are both above 12K, which is Burn-Jones and remind me who it is again, Dan Houston, who's available as defender, midfielder. So if you're taking Gawn, you won't be able to get to these two guys. So who are you looking in the defence here, especially cheaper guys?
Yeah, cheaper. If you're looking for the flankers, you're looking at Hamish Hartlett, around the $10,000 mark. There's a little bit of upside there with him. And then there's a lot of these Port guys disappointed last week, so their salaries are very reasonable. Sam Mays was very popular last week after having 67 in his first game for the club. He disappointed last week, but now he's down to 7-7, and he's a very uncontested footballer. He'll just wait on the outside, and that's where he'll get his points. Not really suited in a game against St Kilda, who become quite a contested outfit. So if we're talking uncontested, I think Mays is an obvious guy to benefit from that. So at 7,000, there's a heap of value there if you're dead set on playing Max Gawn.
Would you consider like a Stephen May, Nathan Jones? Are they around that 9K as well?
Well, I've got concerns over Nathan Jones, but I've had concerns over David Zaharakis the last couple of weeks too. These guys have done it for a long time. They're still capable of bobbing up every now and then. So I wouldn't be totally against those. May is probably going to have a pretty hard job on Dixon. Seems the obvious matchup to me.
Yep.
That might hold him up, but we know what Big Charlie's like. He's not going to really give us stuff to be chasing Stephen May around. So, look, I'm not going to give you a push one way or the other for those guys. I think they're very playable.
All right, let's talk about
All right.
Let's talk about the midfielders here. And as he alluded to before, the Port were very disappointing last week with Ollie Wines, the top ranking midfielder, of only 67 points last week. So obviously this is a good bounce back spot for them. We talked about Mays, so he's probably in the defence at the moment. So who else are you looking here throughout the midfield?
I always come back to Travis Boak for Port Adelaide. He hasn't really flashed a big ceiling though this year. Just the 1 ton. The guys who can really go big are the Melbourne players in Oliver and Petrarca especially. Petrarca's had an unbelievable season, but they're coming off a really big game against Brisbane and they're priced right up there. And you want to look at the points against tables on the DFR website. You just look at the bottom of all of them and there's Port Adelaide staring at you. They just do not give up points. So it's going to be hard for these high-priced guys to make their money. So maybe we look at some less popular guys. Xavier Dersma is a guy who is really going to benefit if Melbourne are conceding a heap of uncontested possession. And we know he's got a really high ceiling, Dersma. A couple of games back under his belt now at sub 12K. We could definitely see him up around that 90-point mark. So I think that makes him a reasonable player who's not going to be too highly owned. Mays he really figures to be a very chalky play given you can play him in defence and through the midfield here with really limited amount of value options. And then another guy who sort of fits that outside midfielder mould is Eamon, Carl Eamon, who's unlikely to be popular. He's an unfashionable type of footballer, but he can bob up and get you sort of mid-70s to 80s. If you're taking that angle of playing uncontested players, then him and Dersma are two sort of lesser lights who you can really look at, I think.
Kane Farrell was pretty popular last week in multi-game slates. Is there Can we back up the truck with him? Or was he was playing out, I think he was playing out of the pocket last week. He doesn't really give much action when he was there.
Yeah, no, he's a good one you raise, actually. You know, we like to back the truck up, and he was popular for a reason. He does give you that forward mid flexibility. So a guy like Connor Rosie, who I've always been really high on, has seemed to be stuck up there in the forward line. I don't know if there's a little niggling injury. There's sort of rumours of that's keeping him out of the midfield. So if that goes on, then there's probably more chance for Farrell to get up the ground to the wings a bit. 8,000, yeah. Good spot, Matho. You can definitely play some Farrell.
Oh, excellent. All right, let's move on to the forwards. And obviously, Melbourne's key defence are pretty strong. And then without Marshall, you've only got Steve May against Dixon. And then if they bring in a young bloke such as Woodcock or Cox or even like that, that should nullify it as well. So do we look at crumbing mid forwards, such as, Robbie Grays or what else you got here? Neil Bullens, Milksham, Bailey Fritsch. There are some options here. They're just not great fantasy scoring, but around that 8 to 10K, you have to get one of these guys in.
Yeah, they're really hard to catch, these blokes. It makes me wonder if we just pay up for Petrarca. 14K, like, he's just been so consistent this year. He hasn't gone below 69, and he's had only 2 games below 89. So 14.7, if he gets the sort of 89, 90 mark, you're really happy with the value he's returning. We talk about backing the truck up. Another guy who was pretty popular was Zach Butters last week, and he returned a massive 18 for his happy coaches, I guess you could describe them. You've got to have balls of steel to be backing up on Zach Butters after he gives you an 18. So I reckon that's going to knock his ownership down here. He seems like a pretty proud type of bloke, Zach Butters. He's only a little fella, but he's got a lot of go in him, and he's definitely got a pretty good ceiling for that $10,000 price tag. So in a pool of forwards I'm not really wrapped in, I'm very happy to give him another chance here in what's probably a much better situation for him.
All right, any final thoughts on this particular game? On the surface, it looks pretty difficult without any glaring value options. We probably have to wait for teams. We probably might get a 5K guy. You just never know with this compression here, but especially if you take Gawn, it's going to be pretty tough here.
Yeah, so the more I think about it, the more I'm hoping they play Lycett so I can avoid Gawn. I actually like that Luke Jackson play, to be brutally honest. So I'm going to hope they play both and play Jackson, then you can sort of go wild picking a lot of these guys. I just get nervous thinking that guys like Sam Mays or maybe Kane Farrell are going to be really chalky. It just doesn't sit well with me.
All right. Well, Hef,
I like the Wednesday game much better. Have you got that feeling?
I do. I do. So, look, if you feel like you're having a night off, then sure. Thursday's not too bad. I'm looking forward to the Friday early doubleheader. Obviously, we won't cover in the show today, but geez, it's going to be something different on Fridays. Getting prepared at
50K contest on the doubleheader too.
4:30. You have to be prepared at 4:30 for teams, and then knock off, and then get some teams in. It's going to be
knocked off well before 4:30, won't you, Smatho?
Gosh, I'll be grinding away. Don't worry about that. On Super Friday too. Remember, it's Super Friday on Friday. So
huge day.
Might need a little early night on Thursday night. So, all right. Well, let's wrap up the show for this edition. This is episode 9. I think we might be celebrating 50 shows soon, Hef, so just keep an eye on the counter there. So we might have to do something special here.
More unlikely 50 than Ben Hilfenhaus scored in England.
What a great half ton that was too. Make sure you get to dailyfantasyrankings.com.au, subscribe to our YouTube channel, do all the things that you need to do to make sure you're prepared for AFL DFS, especially over these 20 days. Hef, thanks for your thoughts for these 2 particular games.
Thank you. Good luck to everyone on many days of AFL to come.
Let's just say every day. All right, we'll catch you on the next edition of the DFR Down Under Show. Not sure when we'll be back. We'll find a day where we can squeeze something in, and we'll catch you soon. Thanks, Hef.
Thanks, mate. See ya.
Cheers.